Assalamu alaikum, beautiful students. Today's lecture is for the students of 11th standard. Lecture is titled Person Helicon. Person Helicon is a poem dedicated to Michael Longley. The poem is composed by Seamus Heaney. Components of the lecture are life and works of the poet, text of the poem. First is life and works of the poet. Second is title of the poem. Third, text of the poem. Then structure of the poem. Summary of the poem. Theme of the poem. Literary devices used in the poem. Glossary. Textual questions. First, life and works of Seamus Heaney. Born in 1939, died in 2013, very recently. He was an Irish poet, playwright, and translator. He won Nobel Prize in 1995 for literature. He was born in Ireland and was first of 9 kids of his parents. He studied English language and literature at Queen's University and graduated in 1961. He began writing poetry after reading Ted Hughes' book Call. In 1963, he became a lecturer at St. Joseph's College. In 1965, he married Mary Devlin, a school teacher. She was also a small writer. Next, in 1972, he left the job to be a full-time writer. In 1976, he was made head of English department at a college in Dublin. In 1981, he went to the United States of America as a visiting professor and taught at Harvard till 1997. He taught at Oxford too from 1989 to 1994. He was the poet in residence at Harvard from 1988 to 2006. He played football when he was a child. He called himself Irish and not British. He is the best poet of Ireland after W.B. Yeats. He died at the age of 74 and was buried in Northern Ireland. His famous books are here: Death of a Naturalist, 1966, North, 1975, Field Work, 1979, The Spirit Level, 1996, Beowulf, Anubis. Actually, it is a book translated by him in 1999, District and Circle, 2006 again, Human Chain, 2010. Title of the poem, Person Helicon. Helicon is the name of a mountain in Greece, and the two water springs flowing from it are believed to be the sources of poetic inspiration and other arts. It is the same mountain on which the Greek youth Narcissus saw his own reflection in water, fell in love with it, pined away, and finally killed himself. However, the poet refers to the place where he spent his early childhood as his personal Helicon, and he draws the parallels between the Greek Helicon and his personal Helicon in the poem. The poem is dedicated to a contemporary poet and friend of Seamus Heaney, Mr. Michael Longley from Belfast. Text of the poem is here, Person Helicon by Seamus Heaney. As a child, they could not keep me from wells and old pumps with buckets and windlasses. I loved the dark drop, the trapped sky, the smells of water weed, fungus, and dank moss. Just very simple. The poet says that when he was a child, they could not keep me, meaning his family members, his guardians could not stop him from wells and old pumps from going to wells and old pumps with buckets and windlasses. Some wells had buckets, some didn't have, some wells had windlasses. Windlasses actually a tool with whose help you can bring water out of wells. I love the dark drop, the trapped sky, the smell. No, he gives us here a reason that why did he like wells. Why did he love wells? He says, I love the dark drop. Now when you drop a bucket into the well, the bucket touches, or rather strikes, the surface of the water, and it makes a sound, and that sound was loved by the poet. The trapped sky here means reflection of sky, that the poet used to see from certain wells. The smells of waterweed, you know, it is a kind of growth, a plant, and again fungus also, that leafless, flowerless growth on dirty things, wood, etc. And dank moss means here wet moss again, growth on wet things. Now, in short, he means to say here that when he was a child, he loved to go to wells and old pumps, and those wells, some of those wells had buckets, some didn't have buckets, and he could see his own reflection, the reflection of the sky, and he could see their plants with, you can say, nice smells. That is what is said in this first stanza. Stanza 2 is here. One in the brickyard with a rotted boat top, I severed the rich crash when a bucket plummeted down at the end of a rope, so deep you saw no reflection in it. Now, in stanza 2, the poet describes a well. He says, one in the brickyard. One well was located in a brickyard with a rotted boat top, or it was covered, we can say the lid of that brick yard well was a rotted, damaged, decayed board top, a piece of wood, I savored means I enjoyed the rich crash when the bucket plummeted down means fell down. So here in this well, situated in a brickyard, the poet would plummet down a bucket, and when the bucket would strike the surface of the water, it would make a crash, a sound, and that sound was loved by the poet because he was a child in those days. At the end of a rope, with the help by the help of this rope, he could bring out water, or he could drop down the bucket into the water. So deep you saw no reflection in it. This well was deep well. He could not see his own image, own reflection into the water of this particular well. Next you have here stanza 3, a shallow one under a dry stone ditch, rectified like an aquarium. When you dragged out long roots from the soft mulch, a white face hovered over the bottom. Shallow. Another well was shallow. It was not deep. Under a dry stone ditch, it was in some stone ditch. Understand? Dry stone ditch. And here he says under a dry stone ditch, fructified like an aquarium. He says this shallow well located in some dry stone ditch had many water animals in it, fructified like an aquarium, means this one had many water animals, maybe fish, etc. in it. Fructified, say they were there in abundance or multiplied. When you dragged out long roots from the soft mulch, a white face hovered over the bottom. He says sometimes you would bring out these soft mulch. Mulch again means here decayed leaves. And if the well is not that much deep, understand, so you are able to see the dirt, dung, and filter, or even leaves, etc. that how that people have, or that by say automatically may have fallen into it. The poet says you could see the dirt, dung, filth, mulch, etc. into it. And sometimes when you would bring water out of this shallow well, and with water you could see a white face hover over the bottom. A white face hover over the bottom. Hovering over the bottom here may mean that some white plant or some white object, maybe white leaves or something white was floating on the bottom of this well. So it was one more well that the poet used to visit. Next to you here, others had echoes, gave back your own call with a clean new music in it, and one was scarcesome, for there out of furnace and tall foxglows, a rat slapped across my reflection. Now he says there were more wells, and some wells had echoes. Give back your own call with a clean new music in it. Now echo, you know that whatever you say when you are, you can say at a raised ground, at a high ground, you cry, you shout, and down into the valley, and your voice comes back. He says certain these wells were liked by him, liked by the poet, because they had echoes, and one was scarcesome, and one particular well was scarcesome and is frightening. It was frightening. It frightened poet once. How? But there out of furnace means out of plants, out of long grass that was there uh, at the bottom of the well, and tall foxgloves. Foxgloves is a species of plant. Again, a rat slapped across my reflection. Now here what happened? Poet was looking at his reflection into this particular well, and all of a sudden a rat, uh, perhaps a rat, crossed from one side to the other side, went from one side to the other side, or jumped from one side of the well to the other side, and by doing that, perhaps with its claws or with its tail, it touched the reflection of the poet, uh, reflection of the poet into that water, and the poet, as a child, he got scared, and that is why he says here, and one was scarce part there out of furnace, and tall fox a rat slapped across my reflection. So poet here got frightened. Now to pry into roots, to finger slime, to stare big-eyed Narcissus into some spring, is beneath all adult dignity. I rhyme to see myself, to set the darkness echoing. Now he says, now there is a shift. Now in the thought, first he was sharing with us his childhood experiences. Now he says, now he is adult. Now he's a point. He is now grown up. To pry into roots means to look into roots, to look into the plant is growing at the bottom of different wells. To finger slime, to play with mud. That's the slime, thin mud. To stare means to see fixedly. Big-eyed Narcissus. Now, big-eyed Narcissus, you know. I'm going to tell you later in the video who this Narcissus was. Big-eyed Narcissus into some spring is beneath all adult dignity. He says now the poet is adult. Now he say it is unbecoming of him to play with mud, to go to wells and look into the bottom of the wells, and all those things that he used to do in his childhood. He says those things do not say suit him now. He's no adult. Now what he does as an adult, he says I rhyme. Means I write poetry now to see myself. I rhyme to see myself. Now he writes poetry to see myself, means to explore, I say, his self. Understand? He's expressing his thoughts, his you can say emotions, his feelings, etc. in his poetry, to set the darkness echoing. Now darkness here is a very confusing word. The poet says that he keeps the darkness echoing. So what is this darkness here? I think this darkness is here the dark human nature, because you know that science and technology did wonders in many fields. It explored the universe to a great extent. It also knows much about human body, but even science doesn't know much about human nature. Human nature is still dark. That why we human beings like something, dislike something, or we human beings evil by nature, or selfish by nature, or selfless by nature. All these things need to be explored, and that is what the poet tells us that he is doing it. He is exploring his self. Understand, he is exploring his human nature, and he's writing poetry. He's expressing his dark human nature through poetry. So this is the literal uh, rendering meaning of this poem titled Personal Helicon. But if you look deeply, this poem is not just about childhood experiences. This poem is actually an example of self exploration. These five stanzas, the poem is divided into five stanzas. And the first stanza, as a child, they could not keep me from Wallace. These five stanzas actually, I think, they explain, they describe the five stages of the life of the poet. So first stanza here describes the early childhood of the poet, when he says that he was very stubborn child. He could go to wells, his family members could not stop him, and life in those days, the in this early childhood, described in the very first stanza of the poem. It was very beautiful. He says, I love dark drop, trapped sky. Now, in childhood, you can imagine the whole sky trapped in a well. So, as a child, he had dreams and he had illusions, and he loved everything that was around him. The world was beautiful. So that is how he describes his first stage of his life in this first stanza of the poem. Now, next stanza, the life gets a bit tougher. He says, one in a brickyard with a rotted bow top, I severed the rich crash when a bucket plummeted down at the end of a rope. Uh, so deep you saw no reflection. Now, as the poet grows up, understand, the life starts getting serious. Now there are things that confuse him, that there are things which he does not understand. He says, so deep you saw no reflection in it. And sometimes he doesn't know what he is doing. He doesn't know the real meaning, real purpose of the things that are around him. So I think this is the teenage. In this second sentence of the poem, the poet is actually describing his teenage, when sometimes your life is very easy, you enjoy it, but sometimes certain questions arise in your mind and you don't have answers to those questions. Now the reality of life starts revealing itself to the point. Next is here a shallow one under a dry stone ditch, fructified like an aquarium. When you dragged out long roots from the soft mulch, a white face hovered over the bottom. I think here the poet tells us that grew when he grew older, and I think the early adulthood, in his early adulthood, he started say looking for his identity. He said, dragged out long roots. He started looking for his identity, who he actually is, what his religion is, what his ethnicity is, what is his social status, what is his position in society, what is the position of his family, how his family has been living down the generations, and all that. And he says a white face hovered over the bottom. So white face came down. Now he now he finds himself entirely a different person. entirely a different entity than the one he thought earlier he was. Understand? Now then you have here others had echoes, gave back your own call with a clean new music in it, and one was sarcasm. Now clean music, and you said echoes. I think here in this stanza he describes the fourth stage of his life, the stage of his life when he was accepted and appreciated and welcome in certain realms, certain spheres of his life, but at the same time he was rejected and he was alienated in other spheres of his life. Now when you are an adult and you say something and people take your words, your statements, your actions seriously, and some people they accept your behavior, some don't accept your behavior, somewhere you are accepted, somewhere you are rejected. I think he describes here that others had echoes clean new music, referring to good spheres, good areas where he was loved, appreciated, and there's a was scarcesome and one was scarcesome part there out of her. And sometimes in certain you can say areas, in certain places the poet was not welcome, he was frightened, he had to go back. And then last he says now to pry into root to. Now he here describes the last stage, the very mature and very adult stage of his life, when he was you can say when he had established his fame as a poet. Understand? And when people started appreciating him, loving him, when he was welcome, when he was uh, welcomed everywhere as a poet. Why? Because he said that he explores human nature, he enlightens people on human nature, he apprises them, he acquaints them that what human nature actually is, because human nature is a mystery. And if some person somewhere, some scholar, some poet, some genius tells you something about this human nature which you feel is truth, is reality, you start liking him, you start reading his books, you start you can say idolizing him, you make that scholar, that poet your icon. That is what he does here. He says I gave up looking at I gave up looking for my personal pleasures. I gave up interest in my person, and now I look at myself, but not as a person, but as a representative of the humankind. I think this is the meaning, real meaning of the poem when you will say read it at a deeper level. Next you have structure of the poem. The poem is comprised upon 20 lines divided into 5 stanzas. The first line of every stanza rhymes with the third line and the second line with the fourth. The first 4 stanzas are in past tense, whereas the last one is in present tense. Some words are not colloquial at all. However, the overall diction is easy and comprehensive. The poem is filled with the literary devices like assonance, synesthesia, imagery, metaphors, onomatopoeia, allusions, etc. Summary for average readers. The poet states that he loved wells and water pumps in his childhood, and his family members could not stop him from visiting wells. He adds that he loved to throw buckets down into the wells to hear them strike the water. He was attracted to water plants, mud, and fungus. He loved to see his reflection and the reflection of the sky and water. He explains that there was a deep well in a brickyard and he couldn't see his reflection in it. Another well was shallow and was filled with water animals and water plants. Some wells had echoes and some were frightening. He concludes by saying that he has given up visiting wells and playing with mud as he is an adult now and writes the poetry that reflects his human nature, which is darker and more confusing than any well. Theme of the poem. The poem describes the childhood experiences of the poet. He had a deep fascination for wells and water pumps. Like other kids, he was born and couldn't be confined to home. At a deeper level, it illustrates with various images and metaphors the different stages of the life of the poet, as how his thinking and mentality underwent a change over the course of time. In that case, the poet is an in that case the poem is an example of self-realization and self-exploration. Also, the poet acquaints the readers of his poetic inspirations, implying that his surroundings inspired him to write poetry, as is manifested from the unique title of the poem as well. Then you have literary devices used in the poem. First is use of assonantes, that is, and old pumps with buckets, pumps buckets. Use of synesthesia is here. I love the dark drop, dark drop. So dark drop is an example of synesthesia here. Use of metaphors, well as I said here, may mean the different stages in his life. Then darkness can be here metaphor for human nature. Imagery is here the trapped sky, the smell of water weed, fructified like an aquarium, a rat slapped across my reflection, finger slime. These are different images. Then onomatopoeia means plummeted down, crash. Allusion is just Narcissus. Allusion is also Helicon, because these two words refer to other things. Then you have glossary, windlass, a tool to lift things up or drop down. Fungus, leafless and flowerless plant is growing on dirt. Rotted, decayed, damaged, soured, enjoyed. Shallow, not deep. Aquarium, a water body with animals in it. Scaresome, frightening. Fox glows, a species of plants. Pry into, look deeply into. Slime, thin mud. I rhyme, I write poetry. Set the darkness echoing to keep exploring my own human nature. Then your question is here. The poem is written on a note of nostalgia. What is the significance of the title, Person Helicon? The title is very suggestive and apt. It indicates rightly what is there in the poem. Helicon is the name of a mountain in Greece, and the two water springs flowing from it are believed to be the source of poetic inspiration. It is the same mountain on which the Greek youth Narcissus saw his own reflection in water, fell in love with it, pined away, and finally killed himself. However, the poet refers to the place where he spent his early childhood as his personal Helicon, and he draws the parallels between the Greek Helicon and his personal Helicon in the poem. Why did the poet find wells and old pumps fascinating in his childhood? The poet found wells and old pumps fascinating in his childhood because he could see his own reflection in them, and he could see in them animals and various nice smelling ponds. Why did the poet find one of the wells scary? The poet found one of the wells scary because he saw a rat slapping across his reflection in it once. What difference do you notice between the poet as a child and the poet as a mature adult? The poet as a child was playing with water and mud, whereas the poet as a mature adult feels shy to do that. Right? Is the poet that reflects his own nature. So with this, we came to the end of this lecture. Hope you liked it. Well, I'm not a great scholar. I am also a student, like most of you. If you liked this video, please subscribe my channel and like this video and other videos. Share this video, other videos with your friends. Love you all.